She's so excited to be back. She just, she's still muted. Okay. Yeah, we're not responding because we can't hear you. Okay.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Good. Yeah, no, it's good to be on US soil. Believe me.
You have a good time?
Yeah. Had a great time. Went to, I left Marrakesh this morning. So
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
we've,
Counselor Wright, are you on this committee?
oh, here comes
No.
Councilor Kelly.
No, but we're going to be talking about Border Street, correct?
Yes.
Which is my ward.
So joining us, not on the committee, is Counselor Wright and Counselor Maliki and Counselor Farrell. And we also have present for probably the whole meeting, Commissioner McGonigal and Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner McGonigal, does Lou have to be here for this meeting, or are you handling the whole thing?
No, we'll handle it. Any questions that can't be answered by us, we can get those answers for you from Lou and or our consultants.
Oh, I forgot to introduce myself and our clerk. So I'm Susan Albright, Chair of the committee, and Evan Cudmore. This is his last meeting with us. He's our committee clerk for at least another week. Yes. Okay, the first item is 3224. Councilors Maliki, Kelly, and Wright requesting regular updates from DPW on the status of Border Street Culvert MWRA easement, potential engineering solutions, and other measures to mitigate risk of flooding and knowledge gained from stormwater studies. So you're on, Commissioner McGonigal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so Border Street, as many of you are aware, is one of our areas of concern of flooding throughout the city. This past year, we did do extensive work there in regrading the street, repairing the curbing, clearing the drains, and the lines through that. That work is all complete. Obviously, that helps with the issue, but will not fix the problem. We have had our consultant, Weston and Sampson, who has worked in this area for many years, do a preliminary study of the area. And as many of you know, during that investigation, there was the discovery of a 60-inch water main that really takes up a good portion of the culvert that goes along Border Street and under Elm Street. That culvert continues under the police station parking lot. so with that, the consultant, we brought this to MWR's attention. This was installed many, I believe in the 30s, 1930, this water main was installed. Preliminary discussions with the MWRA that this will be a very large, impactful project to have them move that. So we wanted to look at other avenues. We have looked at possible pump stations. There are really no simple solutions here that would be viable, that would guarantee to solve the flooding problem during extreme events on Border Street. Right now, our consultant stressed the importance of conducting a hydraulic model of the Cheesecake Brook subbasin. The concern there is that first to understand if we did move this water main, will that alleviate the flooding problem on Border Street? And if it does do that, what are the impacts downstream? As we know, one of the most prone areas for flooding in the area is Albemarle. And this is downstream of that. So we want to ensure what the impacts would be downstream, to avoid making things worse if we do have MWRA move this water main. That hydraulic study is about $515,000. It does qualify for a grant from the Office of Energy Environmental Affairs from the state. That grant opportunity opens every mid-March, so we are applying for that grant. We're actually meeting with the grant writer next week to go over this, to ensure we put the best possible grant forward. This grant would cover the majority of this. It's a 75-25, so the state would pay the 75% of that $515,000. And the city would take on about $130,000 of that $515,000. So that's our next step at this point. Again, we need to have that hydraulic study before we make any assumptions or plan on doing any other work, just to ensure we don't have to do additional work downstream prior to doing anything major upstream near Border Street. Happy to take any questions.
So the letter that Lou sent us earlier today, the report that he sent us, have all the issues that were identified in that report been corrected? Like there were some stormwater drains that were in need of repair. There was a crack somewhere.
Yes, we've done all the minor work that we can do to address that in the area.
Okay. So Councilor Wright.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So what's a pump station?
Pump station is what pumps the water in areas of low elevation, or if we're pumping uphill instead of, a lot of this is all gravity fed throughout the city. So we have water pump stations, sewer pump stations, and we have 2 stormwater pump stations throughout the city.
So where would it be pumping the water to, and where would the pumps be located?
Right. Well, that's what would have to be designed, Counselor. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
It would bypass that water main that is obstructing. If it was determined in the hydraulic model that all we need to do is get the water around that water main, that could be one option. Again, the preliminary look at that is it really wouldn't be viable. We were hoping that, because that would be probably the easiest. Again, all of these are expensive options, but putting a pump station in gives us the ability to put this in many different areas as opposed to relying on the gravity flow.
So I just want to point out, I live at the end of I live on Eden Ave, and Eden Ave, right at the end there at Watertown Street, then it opens up the culvert and it goes into Cheesecake Brook there. That intersection floods, and they have to close that intersection many times. So it doesn't flood as much as Border Street, but it does flood, and the police have to close, and you got to go around. So That's another thought when you're pushing the water down, that area might need to be looked at too.
Yes, you're correct. That's the importance of doing this hydraulic model. So we will understand the impacts downstream, because you're right. If we're going to put more water in areas that are already prone to flood, we need to address those areas first.
And it seemed to flood when they changed out the pipes, the old pipes to the new pipes like 10 years ago. We never flooded down here at all. But when they changed the pipes, we get a lot more flooding there. And I just logically, if you're pushing the water down, it seems like you are going to get flooding downstream. I mean, the nice thing on Albemarle, generally you have a lot more space, and I go by that area a lot, and when it does flood, it floods up to the stairs and stuff. But that doesn't happen as much as when it floods on Border Street in the extreme on Border.
Yes, again, that's the importance of having that model to understand where the impacts are going to be, and to know that before we send more water down the Cheesecake Brook.
So then you would need to fix the other areas before you fix Border Street? If
Yes,
it comes
well,
up?
that's what if it was going to increase the flooding down there, it could be, much worse than it is now. So again, those are the assumptions we'll look that we're making now, and then the modeling will help us determine where we have to put our next efforts.
And the other thing is they're having a flood area at Dunstan East, and they're building that now. So they should probably put that into the model. So because I think they're changing up a little bit or making it more stable, Cheesecake Brook in there. But there's also, right now they don't have an area, a grass area for overflow flooding, but that should be included in the model, and that should be there in the next few years.
Yes, no, that's the reason for why this model is so expensive. It takes into account every bit of water that comes in, every catch basin, every area of runoff, any new development that we're doing. So they'll be taking their plans, because the new development will be required to mitigate their water. So
Well, it's going to do a better job than there is right now, and there's
exactly
going to be. But the other thing is, right at that area is the stormwater from the Mass Pike comes into Cheesecake Brook, so that's
Yes.
dumping a lot of water in there too.
It's a massive study, and it takes all that into account.
Okay.
Which is really what we need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before I.
One more question. What's the likelihood, do you think we would get the grant?
The likelihood is very good. That's why we're bringing on a grant writer to ensure, because of the value of this, to ensure we put forward the best possible grant forward. Also, we have, with that water main there, we have all of that data, the pictures. Very good possibility that we receive this grant. Because
So the grant goes in this month. When would it, when will you receive it?
We'll find that out next week when we meet with them. I don't know for sure, to be honest with you, when they would award the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Would the grant assume that the MWRA keeps its water main there? Or,
No, Counselor, the grant has nothing. The grant just, what that does is that allows us to do the model to figure what will happen if we remove that pipe.
oh, okay.
All the downstream effects and
Okay.
the effects on Border Street.
Okay, good. Okay, and before I call on the next person, I just want to say we've been joined by Chief Operating Officer Jonathan Yo. So Councilor Kalis?
No, you just asked my question. Thanks.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Councilor Maliki, I think you're next.
Oh, okay, I thought the people on the screen might be next. Let's see, first of all, just to be clear, the $515,000 study, would that cover the whole city or not just the Cheesecake Brook watershed?
This is just the Cheesecake Brook watershed, Counselor. That's
okay.
that's
All
how
right.
expensive these studies. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. As we said, they take into account every bit of runoff, every catch basin, every new project.
Okay, so it would be basically then Cheesecake Brook from where it starts up on the golf course, anything that comes into Cheesecake Brook and all the way out to the Charles?
That is correct.
Okay, and actually Counselor Farrell and I were on a Zoom with Cindy Cream, staff person, talking about she's trying to make a case for more funding for the MVP program generally, and we were kind of citing all our examples. I just wanted to go over some of the questions, which mostly answered in the memo today. I was just curious, one question that was not answered, does anyone have a copy of that easement that we granted to the MWRA, or is that sort of lost to history?
I saw that. We're looking into that, Counselor. We haven't lost track. We just didn't have a definitive answer. So we will, like I said, this is, I believe it's 1930s when that was installed. So we'll look into that.
Yeah, the Weston and Sampson memo said 1930, I believe it was 1932, but then somewhere in Lou Taverna's answers, it talked about the 1950s. Did something else happen in the 1950s?
I'm not sure. We'll check.
I
on
think
it.
they cleaned and lined it or something at
Yeah,
that time
there may have
period.
been
yes.
some major work done there, but it
Yeah.
wasn't any new installation.
Oh, okay. And again, if you don't, or the MWRA hasn't said anything about how they would move the pipe. From the memos, it looks like the what was studied was the idea of going down 30 feet and then up again. And is there any, is that what they thought was their best option, doing that somewhere, either there or on Cherry Street? They didn't look at sort of doing something west of Border Street?
Yeah, and getting into the details, I mean, it's that initially that's their first thought to avoid any other conflicts. Again, we're dealing with, again, this is a massive water main.
Right.
As any of you, and I know Councilor probably Laredo is aware of the work that was just done on Ward and Waverly over the last couple of years. You know, those were 20 and 30-inch water mains. This is 2 times and 3 times the size of that. So we're really limited to what we can do, and it's a big project. As we, this was all preliminary. There wasn't a deep dive into this. We're just looking to see if there was any quick fix that, would be viable early on without getting into the deep studies like what we're going to have to do.
And looking at the Weston and Sampson memo about kind of the pumping options, it looked like at least for the size pump, they sort of did the math on, it would have taken something like 12 hours to pump the volume of water they estimated, and it drains a lot faster than that on its own, so that did not seem to be like a feasible thing unless you had a 10 times bigger pump or something like that. I was just wondering, is there any way to sort of get ahead of peak volume so that you're pumping in advance and making space in the culvert ahead of the culvert filling up, rather than waiting till the.
Yeah, without bypassing it. And again, that's the reason for, having an understanding of if we remove that 60-inch water main, what will happen? And that's the question we really have to answer first. Unfortunately, these other areas we looked at, we're just looking for a quick fix. If we bypassed, as you said, you obviously read it, it's like 11 hours, the water always recedes within that time period. What we see with the flooding throughout the city, it's about the same amount of time it takes to recede as it does to flood. And that's pretty much a good general rule of thumb, except for this, this super extreme event.
And you said you're kind of looking at with Parks and Rec about what could be done at McGrath Playground. It just seems like that would be a logical area to try to store water, since it's kind of the last large open space upstream of Border Street.
And we are, and that's going to help. We actually just have been working with the engineers there. We've come up with a design that's going to infiltrate quite a bit of water there. Every little project like we do here will help alleviate this, but there's not going to be one big fix. But yeah, we'll be coming to you all with the McGrath when that project goes through, and we have come up with a solution to infiltrate quite a bit of water there, which will help with our phosphorus reduction also. So good news on the horizon there.
And I had asked about if you had a sense of what percent of the water that comes into Border Street is coming from the McGrath end, and I see there's also a 5 by 5 foot box culvert coming into the 12 by 6 foot. Do you have a sense of sort of what percent of the water is coming from the McGrath end versus wherever that 5 by 5 culvert comes from?
And we don't, and that's the reason for this detailed hydraulic study.
Hydraulics. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, Counselor Leary.
I have a feeling all my questions will be answered by saying the hydraulic model will give us all. We have to wait for the hydraulic model. I understand that. And I think some of the questions I was going to ask have already been answered. But just quickly, does the Stormwater Fund have the capacity to pay for the city's portion of it? Is that?
Yeah, we'll figure that in, Counselor, yes, and I'm sorry, it sounds like that. If you look in the study, we tried to look at quick fixes that wouldn't require this in-depth study, and there's really no good answer here. Anything that we proposed and even looked at is still gonna be a significant project. And we want to ensure that if we're going to spend those dollars, that we get the right project here. So the next step is really that study.
Right. So you looked into then any kind of mitigation, like porous pavers or rain gardens or any kind of things to mitigate some of the water?
It's just, again, any work we do will help with that, but it's not going to fix the issues that we have here. I mean, the pump station we looked at is a massive pump. And even that can't keep up with it. So any infiltration solution would not move nearly the amount of water that pump station would.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Danberg is next.
Thank you. Most of the questions that I had, we've touched on already. But if there's a 60-inch main, we don't know where it's coming from and we don't know where it goes. And that's why we need to do the hydraulic study. Is that correct?
No, Counselor, it's very well mapped out. It's the MWRA, one of their water mains. It serves multiple communities. The problem is, many years ago, we made the decision along with the MWRA to allow them to put that through the culvert, and it blocks just about half of that culvert. So it's a restriction. It's a restriction in the system that unfortunately isn't an easy fix.
I see. And the idea would be to cap it off. If we're talking about removing it, capping it off and determining what would happen if we did that.
No,
And
it would
removing a
have to-
section of it.
It would have to be relocated, Counselor.
I see. To another street or to down
Well,
below it or above it or how?
The
how do you
MWRA,
relocate?
their preliminary investigation shows that the easiest path is it would have to be 30 feet deep from where it is now.
I see. And so if we went down low enough, it would prevent the flooding from happening because it wouldn't be blocking that culvert.
Correct. But we need to understand if we're going to create other issues downstream first.
Right. Okay. And I think I remember the number 1,400, that we've got about 1,400 catch basins in the city. How many catch basins are in this vicinity that might be affected?
I don't have that exact number. It's actually about over 13,000 throughout the city.
13,000.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, significant
Wow,
number.
okay.
We have it all mapped out. I could get you that exact number.
Well, that's all right.
GIS.
Yeah, I just wanted to get an idea. Okay, I'm all for moving ahead with this. If I'll leave it to the Ward 3 people to make the motion, but I will certainly support this.
Thank you.
Counselor Wright, I'm gonna let Counselor Rado go before you because you've already
Yep.
spoken. Go ahead.
So, there's no vote this evening, obviously. This is just an update, and Commissioner is gonna apply for the grant and then, hopefully get the work done. So Commissioner, if you get the money or don't get the grant, but still proceed ahead, time frame for getting this done?
Just the study is going to probably be about 18 months.
So, and is it your view that the MWRA is not gonna do anything until the study's complete?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll jump in here quickly. This was before my time at MWRA, 1932. And unfortunately, this is a massive project. They have a huge capital program. These projects take years of initial planning. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's at least an 8 to 10 year timeframe.
It
Yeah.
would involve a lot of ripping up the streets, for example, to move everything, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, very, very disruptive.
If the streets are ripped up, Mr. Yo, pays for that work.
The MWRA better pay for all this. I mean,
Well,
I'm not an attorney, Mark, you are, but I,
Just like they
they-
are gonna pay with you better.
yeah, they're, they put it there. I don't know how and why that happened. I don't think any of us know that. But it's gonna be a big, we gotta get this model done because that will help us prove one way or the other whether this would help. Because they're not gonna do this just on our work. So they're gonna want a lot of engineering analysis. Their board of directors is gonna be very difficult to convince, but we need studies first.
So Commissioner, once you get this study done and understanding the MWRA might take a decade to do the work, can you use the results of the study to do other improvements in the interim?
Yes, no, definitely. This is something that would need to be done. We would normally piecemeal this. But because we need to understand the total downstream effect. So yes, this will definitely help with other projects going forward.
So when it comes time, Madam Chair, I suggest we hold the item, but reschedule it for, a year from now even. Or maybe sooner for a quick update if you get the money and get started. And just so we have a short update on where we are with it.
Yes, thank you. We would have to come back to you for a grant acceptance regardless. So we'll be back long before we can even accept the grant.
I still would hold it. We can always end it.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have, I have
Thank
one quick question before I call on Council Wright. So what if the MWRA doesn't want to move the water pipe? Will your hydraulic study take that into account too, that the water main may just stay there and we have to solve the problem? So how do we do that? Can you look at it with it and without it?
Yes, and Counselor, that's part of the need to do this. So we have to understand if we do remove the pipe, and it does alleviate the flooding on Border Street. As I said earlier, what are those impacts downstream? And there may be much work we have to do downstream before we remove that pipe. So and I know I keep saying this and you don't want to hear it, but that's why we need this study to really understand our next step here.
Yes. Yes. Council Wright.
A couple quick questions. Clarification for me. So the culvert is 12 feet by 6 feet roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the ideas that I've always been saying, I think would help, but it's not part of us. I always say free Cheesecake Brook. And if the golf course could open up, and have a water hazard and Cheesecake Brook going through there, I think that would, worst case, I don't know how we would go about and do that, but I think that would help relieve some of the pressure too.
Yes, no, no doubt. Anything we can add like that, where we can mitigate water, or if we were to add a pond, anything like that, all these things will help, and a lot of this will come out once we conduct this.
There is one pond right at the end before the water leaves the golf course and goes under Com Ave. there is a pond there, but it's not that big, so.
But it goes underground in the golf course for most of it, doesn't it?
There's a lot of open streams, in the
Okay.
golf course. You know, but it's hard now. You have to get past their security to get in there, so.
I don't know, there's a person attendee, Scott Junior, that has his hand up. I don't know if you're gonna take any comments or anything. I think he's one of the owners on Border Street. Counselor Maliki may know that.
Counselor Kelly just mentioned that to me, so.
top of it.
Well, Scott, maybe we can promote you to panelists for them.
Let's take a moment to load up.
Great.
Sorry about that. All right, can everyone see me and hear me?
I can hear you, but not see you.
All right, so yeah, as I said, I'm one of the owners on the street, and obviously you said this project is 8 to 10 years, which that's long. My biggest concern in the short run is I'm just looking, out for the rest of the residents and business owners on the street, is what assurances do we have from the city that we won't have to bear any of the costs to mitigate the issue? Because this is clearly not caused by us, and I know that we operate in a world of special permits. So what assurances do we have in the short run that we're not going to have to make upgrades to our property at the cost of our own dollar?
Commissioner McGonigal or Mr. Yo?
I don't, Scott, I don't see that as, this would be an infrastructure issue on our part. This is about moving that water main, creating better flow downstream if we need be. I don't even know what we would ask you to do with it. That hasn't even come up at this point, and I don't see us going in that direction at all.
Okay, thank you. That's all I really want to know. Really happy this is going on though. So I want to thank you all for your hard work on this.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump in on one thing here. If an applicant was seeking a special permit and somehow changing the size of the building on the property or otherwise, they'd have to keep stormwater on the property for.
That's correct, Counselor. That would be part of the stormwater ordinance, which requires that, yes. Outside of that, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I meant current owners would not be required to do anything. If someone came to the city for a special permit, they would have to comply with the stormwater ordinance, which would have you do that.
Okay. And then actually the last thing is we did have flooding, in the rest of Newton. I think it was in November or December, but Border Street actually didn't flood. And I know there was cleaning right before then and I was maybe suggesting just in the short run that we have more frequent cleaning because that seemed to really help a lot.
And thank you, Scott. I didn't want to bring that up. We talk about that internally because, I'll tell you the way we judge the flooding of a few prone areas, Border Street being one of those, is when we start to see flooding on Homer Street right outside of City Hall. And as soon as we saw that starting to happen, we went out to Border Street and did realize that there was no flooding out there. So we were happy with that. As I said early on, we did do a good cleaning. Regrading the street out there helped because we had a real low spot in the street. And hopefully that will help. But I think in these real extreme events that you're still going to see some flooding, unfortunately. But again, we need to keep every little bit we do helps citywide.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. You guys can turn me off the panel now.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Farrell, did you have a question? Or was it answered?
No, my question, I'm so new at this. I just we've had a relatively wide-ranging discussion here, but I wanted to make certain we're still going to do the second piece, 12224.
Oh, yeah, this is just the
Okay,
first.
great.
item.
Thank you.
We won't skip any docket items. Okay, I think we're all set. So Counselor Kelly, are you moving hold?
I would like to move hold.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is that everybody? Did we lose Counselor Kalis?
Aye.
Aye.
Behind the participants.
Okay, very good. So the next item 122 24. Counselor Albright, on behalf of the Public Facilities Committee, requesting an update from the DPW on plans and projects to improve the stormwater system in Newton. So Commissioner McGonigal, you're on again.
Yeah, so thank you again, Madam Chair. We do have a short presentation because there is a lot involved here, and I know we do have some new members of the council, and we haven't given you an update, probably within a year or so. So we're just gonna go through a presentation here. We'll come back to any slides after, so, if you have a pressing question, please jump in, but we'll come back and answer any questions.
We lost the presentation.
Shauna, we lost our presentation.
There it is.
Okay, so our stormwater presentation, next slide, Shauna. So our stormwater division, our budget for 24 was $4.1 million. Again, this is one of our enterprise funds that are funded through the revenue of the stormwater fees in the city. That includes that $4.1 million are our personnel and operations, our projects, which major projects going on right now. There are some others in the pipeline, which are in the CIP, but our phosphorus control plan, as we've come to you over the last year on. This is, again, a federal and state requirement. The City Hall ponds, which if you've been near City Hall recently, is underway right now. We're completing that dredging project. That will be done before we get into the summer. Another sometime in May will be completed with that. The Bullows Pond Dam engineering. Again, we're working with our consultant. We have a few conceptual designs that we're going to be presenting. We're looking to set up a meeting probably end of March with our working group, possibly early April, but we have conceptual designs for that. Again, that project is another requirement. The Office of Dam Safety deemed that in poor condition and directed us that we have to do some repairs there. And then upcoming Edmonds Park drainage improvements. A lot of work that can happen in Edmonds Park. Again, that's in the CIP, and there'll be more to come. Actually, our next item is slight discussion on that, but that will be coming to you next year for design funds to start some projects there in Edmonds Park. As you all, the NPDES, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which we've been talking a lot about, and the MS4, that's the state's version of that. There are requirements that we have to meet now going forward. As many of you know, there's public education outreach. There's our IDDE, which is the Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination Program, which we've been doing for some years now and was an early requirement. That's removing any illicit discharges from sewer into the stormwater system. We go around year round looking for those and have those repaired throughout the city. Our stormwater ordinance, which requires the management of construction site runoff. We have that ordinance in place now, which was another requirement. The management of post-construction site runoff. Again, part of our ordinance. And then good housekeeping and municipal operations, certain things we need to do within our own operations, vehicle maintenance, our vehicle wash facility, which will be fully compliant, is just about complete. Probably another couple months. And again, open space, buildings and infrastructure as we build new buildings and upgrade buildings And then, of course, our street sweeping and catch basin cleaning programs, which are both required and are part of this permit. Again, the NIPD's requirement, we talked about the illicit discharge detection and elimination. We talk about this every year when we come. It's tracking and reporting all our sewer sanitary overflows, which up until we started this program was a common event in the city. The last one we had was, I believe, 2019 in Lions Field. We've since done the sewer repair work there, and we have not had another sanitary sewer overflow reportable one in the city since then. So we're in really good shape with this program, but we do continue to do it every year, and it still is a requirement. We have all of our outfalls. There's about 380 of those, give or take. All mapped in GIS. All of our stormwater structures, our manholes, our catch basins, all that is mapped in GIS. Again, another requirement. The construction site runoff, we have the ordinances in place now that require that and give us enforcement for that. Post-construction stormwater, again, incorporating maintaining green infrastructure as part of that. And then our good housekeeping, as we talked about, was the street sweeping, the catch basin cleaning, stormwater pollution and prevention measures. Additional NIPD's requirements. Again, there's public outreach and participation requirements, erosion and runoff control information that we would provide to contractors when they get permits for street opening, buildings. That information is all posted on our city stormwater webpage, which is under the utilities section of Public Works. A lot of good information there. Newsletter articles informing residents on proper yard waste collection. Importance of keeping the catch basins clear, especially during the fall when the leaves are falling. That's when we see the most phosphorus put into the system, or really from, while we love the trees, the leaves are a major contributor of phosphorus. Again, septic system do's and don'ts to property owners with septic systems. I believe right now there's only about 200 of those citywide. And then information distributed to pet owners. At the clerk's office, when people come to register their pets, they're given that information there. The 311 system, which allows residents to submit concerns like illicit dumping, pollution and flooding concerns. And then we also have educational outreach at the City Earth Day, Harvest Fair, Green Expo. We have our Public Works Day also, and our household hazardous waste collection days. The phosphorus control plan, again, this is EPA required. This is reducing the nutrients that are discharged into the Charles. All of our stormwater ends up in the Charles at some point. The permit establishes our phosphorus load reduction requirement. You know, next to Boston, we are the highest required to reduce our phosphorus load reductions. These requirements are not only very challenging, it's very expensive, in-depth work. And we keep trying to bring this to you so everyone understands the implications, the needs, and the requirements going forward. As we get deeper into this permit, it becomes more and more challenging and expensive, as I said, and we need to meet all these requirements. I believe we have a slide here. I think it's 2038. So here's the timeline. Yes, we've created the phase 1 plan. Part of that was, again, the ordinance requirements, the IDDE plan, the catch basin cleaning, the street sweeping. We've started to implement that plan. We created the phase 2 PCP plan. And then as we implement phase 2 and phase 3, this is where the costs really come into play. part of our NIPD's permit allows for an alternative schedule request. The EPA has directed us to develop our plan first and then come to them for an alternative schedule. No one in the Charles River watershed has done this yet. We're actually really ahead of most communities. So we have no idea what that entails. We've just started that process with our consultant, Woodard and Curran. And we'll be back to you to share how that's moving along. So the general permit defines the load reduction targets. Again, there's 34 communities required to meet this load reduction, 20% in the first 8 years, and then 25% in the first 10 years. So those numbers in pounds are the phosphorus load reductions that we're required to meet. And it doesn't sound like a lot, 1,420 pounds. But the cost, the industry standard planning cost, which is actually low in what we've seen, $50,000 a pound. A couple of our smaller projects, it's been up to $200,000 a pound. So again, very expensive. Even though that number doesn't sound like a lot, our major project that we just did at the library only removed about 3 pounds of phosphorus. So again, it's critical, but it's a lot of work to get to that 1,420 pounds a year reduction. Again, so our total reduction by 2038 is 5,679 pounds. Again, once we have the alternative schedule, and there's also EPA is looking at some requirements, some scientific studies in other states. New Hampshire just adopted credits for street sweeping through the scientific studies. The EPA now realizes that a lot of this phosphorus load comes from the fall season when the leaves drop from the trees. The leaves lay in the street, and we get rain, and the rain washes the phosphorus into our storm system. So they're allowing significant credits. It's our understanding that Mass is looking to take on these credits, and more of that to come within the next year, we're being told. Again, the ways to reduce phosphorus, we just talked about the street sweeping, which is going to be critical. Our catch basin cleaning. Right now, as I said, there's over 13,000 catch basins. We clean those, we do half each year. We're going to propose in our budget to you this year that we increase that to doing all the catch basins every year. We now have a software program where we can measure the amount of debris in each basin. So after 2 years, we'll have an understanding of which basins need to be cleaned sooner. And I think, as you heard earlier with Scott from Border Street, that he saw firsthand that cleaning the basins did help, again, with the construction work we did. So we want to increase that. So we're looking to double that budget. And then the real costs come into the structural stormwater controls. Built engineered systems such as filtration basins, constructed wetlands, our rain gardens, and things of that nature, these retrofits that we can install, but are definitely the most expensive. So right now, we're really focusing on, we're doing year-round street sweeping when the weather permits, and again, increasing that catch basin cleaning. We've shown you this slide before. It's the comprehensive stormwater retrofitting. It's really permeable surfaces, harvesting rainwater. The more water we can infiltrate into the ground, the better off we'll be. It's going to help with flooding, but that's really about the phosphorus reduction citywide before the water eventually gets to the Charles River. And again, where do we look for these retrofit opportunities? So municipal facilities, properties, the school projects are a big one because those are really the largest projects that we do that usually have some land space. So we're looking at significant reductions in stormwater mitigation at Countryside. We're looking at Franklin and any of the new work that we're doing going forward. It is a high benefit to cost. We can get the most reduction on these larger projects. Some of these projects will, again, doesn't sound like a lot, but 100 pounds reduction in some of these projects. And then our streetscape improvements also, we're looking every little rain garden we can do, whether it's a quarter pound, it all adds up and we get credit for all of that. And again, there's the public-private partnerships also, which we're looking at. We get to take credit for any of these developments where we require them now to mitigate stormwater. We'll be able to apply those pounds that are being reduced to our number, because at the end of the day, it's all going into the Charles River, whether it's ours or it's private. So our new stormwater ordinance is and will be helping with this in all development, even residential rebuilds. The numbers are small there, but they add up. And again, here's some costs. We talked about, how expensive this is. So this phase one, if we were to do all the projects that we could do to meet our goal, is $143 million essentially. Even if we had those dollars at our disposal, it's so much work that we couldn't do it. So it's not only about the dollars, it's about the time and the large projects that are required to meet this load reduction. Full implementation costs. An evaluation was conducted by the Charles River Watershed Association, which we joined in with many other communities. And the full implementation, when they did the study a few years back, they predicted in the range of $200 to $500 million for us. Based on our estimated phase one costs, those numbers are really in the 430 to 575 range. So again, significant costs that really aren't obtainable. And even if dollars, as I said, weren't an issue, it's just so much work that it couldn't be done in that amount of time. So that's the reason for going forward with the alternative schedule. And the EPA is now starting to realize this also. So the purpose of our stormwater ordinance and our stormwater rules and regulations, again, we have to have this to comply with the permit. Establish our stormwater management rules and regulations, which we've done through the help of the council and the approval of the ordinance. Supporting that phosphorus load reduction target, we will continue to do that with every project that we do. This will help us to protect and maintain, enhance the public safety by reducing the volume of stormwater runoff in everything we do, not only citywide, but also residential and commercial construction. Codify the existing stormwater management policy requirements. And again, ensure that new development and redevelopment control and treat runoff before it leaves the property. This will all help to reduce our phosphorus and also helps to reduce the flooding citywide. The permitting benefits. This is our new Gov permit software, which has been very helpful in all of this, especially with the ordinance in place now. We can track the projects for compliance. We're required to supply all this information in our permit annual report. And all that is in the workflow using our new Gov permitting software, which is very flexible. It's been very good to work with. Again, formalizing the standards for our plan reviews, our construction period inspections and project closeout requirements. Part of the NIPDES is requiring that these systems are maintained. Prior to new Gov, that all would have had to have been tracked manually. So again, now we have it in a software that we can report on. And then we have the fee for review of our stormwater projects, the land disturbance, the minor and the major, which were all approved and part of our ordinance that the city council approved. And we've established our enforcement procedures on those. Again, the NewGov database, the application portal for stormwater management certificates of compliance, all this is done online now. There are currently over 300 parcels in the database, and this includes their operations and maintenance plan, which is required under, it's not only installing these systems, but they need to be maintained to receive the credit for the phosphorus reduction on these. And also the portal for property owners to submit their inspection logs, which are required also. Some stormwater projects ongoing, as we just spoke about, City Hall dredging, Bellows Pond Dam, which will be coming to you very soon. Edmonds Park, part of the CIP. Also, we have some immediate needs on Blake Street. We have some flooding there. And there's some catch basin work that needs to be done in Edmonds, in the park itself. Updating our stormwater infrastructure improvement plan, which is slightly dated now. Some of the costs, so we'll be doing that also because we've seen a large increase in the costs. I think we shared with you when we came for approval for the City Hall dredging 11 years ago, that project was 500,000. It's 3 million today for the exact same project and disposal of materials. Stream maintenance, just some of the areas we've done. We have some more of that to do also. That's in the plan. Countryside is one of those, Albemarle. And then some localized flooding projects, South Meadowbrook at Dedham, successful project there where we had surcharges on most major rain events. Quinnipiaquin Road, and our NOI is completed on Beaconwood Road at Cold Spring Brook for some work to be done there. Culverts just throughout the city, completed repairs and investigations that we've done citywide, and again, we'll continue to do those. And then upcoming CIP projects. Again, part of the NIPD's is we need to maintain and spend dollars on our own infrastructure. So we have some work to do at the Crass and Elliott Street DPW yards. Edmonds Park, as you know, we have a study with some work identified there. That is again in the CIP for next year. Union Street drainage, we completed the design there. We're ready to go out to bid for that project, which will be in FY25 also will be coming to you for. Cheesecake Brook improvements, much of that will also be identified in the study that we talked about for Border Street. Again, some rehabilitation in Laundry Brook, South Meadow Brook, and Pellegrini Park.
Jim, if I could just add on, in addition to those CIP projects, as you mentioned, the school projects have significant stormwater work going on. There's some upcoming parks projects as well, including in Albemarle, that have stormwater work that we're hoping to incorporate. So, you know, pretty much in every department, wherever we're going to be digging, we're going to be thinking very carefully about stormwater.
Okay, and if with that, we'll be happy to go back to any slides if you have any questions you want to refer to on the slides.
Councilor Getz, you had a
Yeah,
question during.
Well, just in the very beginning, between those 4 communities that you had mentioned, Newton had such a high number. I mean, it was like 1,400 for the phosphorus, right?
Yeah.
The phosphorus level. And is it in any way, you know, just looking at the 4 there, is that something that gets annually assessed? Where, you know, it just seems like it's such an incredibly large number. You know, I'm assuming that it does get checked, right?
Yes, yes. So all these projects identify the amount of phosphorus that is removed from the stormwater. But Counselor, good point. The reason that ours is much higher is our exact location. We are essentially surrounded on three sides by the Charles River. So it's all about land area and your stormwater infiltration into the Charles River.
Right.
All of our almost 400 outfalls go into the Charles River.
So, and you mentioned, just in terms of contributing phosphorus was the leaf. Are there other, factors that contribute to the phosphorus levels? It's organic matter, but, I'm just trying to figure out in terms of mitigating.
Yeah,
And-
so it's part of that education. You're exactly right. Things like fertilizer, pet waste. Again, the leaves until recently were not regarded as an issue. But they can contribute up to 60% of the phosphorus load during the fall season. So that's, the science is starting to help us in that respect also, where that's something we already have a fleet of street sweepers. We're out there sweeping. If we enhanced our sweeping project, if we ran 2 shifts during these prime months to receive that credit, those are possibilities that the EPA is talking about and that we're hoping, because that's a quick path for us.
Okay, and then the last thing was on one of the slides, there was a enumeration of the cost, and there was 144 million.
Yes, for that first phase.
Right.
If we were to implement all the projects to get to that reduction, that would be the cost right now, today's cost for those projects.
Okay, is there any way to bring that number down?
Yeah, so the EPA has, part of the permit is requesting the alternative schedule. And as I said, we're the first ones to be doing this. So unfortunately, we're the guinea pig here. But in this case, I think it's a good place to be. Sometimes I'm leery of being the early adopter until things are proven, but in this case, I think it's going to serve us better than most.
Okay. It's a very big number.
Yes.
Yes.
Counselor Rado?
Thank you for really a very thorough presentation. A few points. When you get to the specifics of both Bullows Pond and Edmonds Park, there are neighborhood associations for Bullows Pond. There's one for Edmonds Park. I hope you'll be sitting down with those folks as you're doing your planning.
Most definitely, President Laredo. We have a working group that involves members of the Bullows Park Association, some of the ward counselors. That's our next meeting that we'll be setting up, is to meet with them internally before we present any options to anyone, just to get input. And so the people that are really involved and are passionate about this understand what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And that's great. I think that's really important. You'll get a lot of valuable input. So next, you mentioned 311 calls if there's illegal discharge or something of that nature.
Yes.
Who then is tasked with inspecting or responding to those 311 calls?
Those responses, and we do receive quite a few, those go right to our engineering department, and our inspectors will go out and determine. Usually it's things like sump pumps from basements is what we see the most for discharges. People draining their pools in the fall. Those are really the illicit discharges that we see for the most part in that respect.
And so that's handled by your department, not inspectional services, right?
That is correct.
And that's a reactive approach by definition, is complaint driven.
Correct.
What efforts, if any, are there to take some proactive approaches to cut down on those illegal discharges?
Yes, so outside of the public education that we provide during our events, but also anytime someone pulls a permit where any of that work's going to be conducted, whether they're trenching, a sidewalk opening permit, a building permit, they're supplied with that information also.
Who's supplied with the information? The homeowner?
Yes, the homeowner and or whoever pulls the permit.
Right, but it's one thing to give them the information. It's another thing to make sure that they're actually in compliance. And I'm wondering if there's some way that when someone's pulling a building permit, for example, that's an opportunity for an inspector who's going to be on the property anyways to make sure that the stormwater is being disposed of properly.
Yes.
But that's not being done currently, is it?
No, our inspectors are out on the job sites on a regular basis. Yes, they're out there looking for that also and educating when they see it, of course. That's always the first step. Unless we have someone that continuously is being a problem with that.
I'm probably not being very clear with my question. A homeowner, for example, or a small commercial property owner pulls a building permit to do work. Inspectional services will go out and look at that project and sign off on it before you're done. During the,
Engineering often has to sign off on projects. So ISD and engineering work together on building permits on a daily basis.
and so you're saying that there's somebody there who's proactively in those instances checking the stormwater to make sure it's actually being discharged properly?
Yeah, if there's anything that's related to water, or engineering is gonna get tagged as part of the route for the NewGov approval process. So engineering is involved in quite a few, many building permit projects, approvals.
Well, I can follow up on that later.
Sure.
Last question, I know we're betting on the federal government to significantly change its requirements for implementation. But you have a $4 million budget right now for stormwater per year. Mr. Yo, what plans are there?
You'll be hearing soon, as we get to water, sewer, stormwater, rates for next year. Obviously, the stormwater budget needs to increase significantly over the next several years and beyond. So you'll be hearing more about that coming up.
Good, thank you. I'll look forward to a preview of coming attractions. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Council Danberg, you're next.
Thank you. Yes, I'll also thank you very much for this very complete and informative presentation. You've done a great job, the department has, in putting this together. On the Union Street drainage, I'm glad to hear that the construction documents are done. This has been a number of years now in the making. You mentioned that you're planning on completing the job or having it done in FY25. Is that a likely summer FY25, next summer project? Do you have a date for that yet?
We don't have a date, Counselor. Again, it's in the 25 budget, so we will put this out to bid most likely this summer. So depending on the contractor, how the fall winter season goes, it may start before end of calendar year and go into the spring of 25.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
All set, Council Danberg?
Yes.
Council Leary, you're next.
Thank you very much. A quick question, Commissioner, on something you said about the pools. I thought that if people left their pools to, and let the sun break down the chlorine, that they were then allowed to drain the pool into the stormwater. Is that not correct?
No, we would have no way of, I mean, without us going out and testing that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't.
But it breaks down pretty quickly, the chlorine in the sun, so the pool would only have to sit for a few sunny days, I think. But that's what I heard in the past, so I don't know if that changed or whether or not that's always been illegal.
Yeah, no, and essentially it's really the people that put the pump discharge hose right in the catch basin. If they discharge it across their lawn and some dribbles into the street, we're not looking for that. It's when they're pumping directly into the storm system or directly down the street.
Oh, okay. I've seen a hose like coming out of, into the
Right.
street.
Yes,
It-
correct.
That's okay? But-
No, we don't
Oh.
want, because without us testing the water, we don't know what the chemical base of it is.
What do you recommend for pool owners to do?
Well, as I said, they really like stormwater, you need to keep it on your property is the preference. It's
Okay.
it's much more, if they have a garden or something of that nature, I know it's difficult. Usually it's not a lot of water, they're just pumping it down so they can put the cover on for the season. But sometimes we do see extreme events, and that's when it gets reported to us, so our inspectors see it.
Okay, it's not a problem for my kiddie pool, but asking for a friend. One other thing, as you know, there are areas around the city where we're having significant flooding, and there seem to be some high areas where that's really more of a problem than in other areas. And I think some of them have already been identified, but at the Newton Corner Neighborhood Association meeting, I got a lot of questions about the Church Street and Eldridge intersection. And I wanted to get that on your radar. I'm sure it's one of many areas that flood, particularly when we get those really intense rain events. But at the last summer's intense rain event, there were a couple of cars that were stuck in the water there. And I'm wondering, has your team looked at that and identified that as an area where we can do any improvements? Or are you is it just standard procedures about making sure that our storm basins are being cleaned out? Or have you
So what
identified
we've-
a problem?
Yes, no, thank you. We've, especially this year with the record-breaking storms, we're all well aware of it. Record-breaking rainfall, the intensity of the storms. What we started doing about midway through is identifying any area of flooding, going in and cleaning the catch basins, and we're also televising those drain lines. And we have found some issues there. It's
Have you
not,
found any at Church and Eldridge? Is that
I
one
don't,
area?
I'll check and see if that should be on our list if it's an issue, but we'll check on that. We'll make
I
it.
want to follow up with you because I have to report back.
Sure.
I appreciate it. And then actually one thing I wanted to dig into was the EPA has these RDAs, residual designation authority now, where they're going to start requiring permit coverage for stormwater discharges in areas that were not regulated before from commercial sources. I imagine this would be a big benefit to the city as well as to our stormwater improvement. And I was wondering if you had been following that, and is that going to be part of our overall strategy to improve not only, of course, the Charles River, but our other water bodies? I'm thinking of the Hammond Pond right at the Chestnut Hill Mall, where you essentially have the parking lot right up to the pond. And I know a number of years ago, Representative Balser had put in some mitigation there in terms of a rain garden. But the water there is still very impaired. And I was just using that as an example with this RDA and what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, no, we are watching that, Counselor. Our consultant brought that to us early on. We're fortunate to have Woodard and Curran, who is our main stormwater consultant. Their lead scientist works very closely with the EPA, so we do get this information. It will be a huge benefit to us if they start to require. What the requirement is looking at is requiring current commercial facilities, and it's the larger ones at first, I think. It still has not come.
1 acre or more, I think it is.
Yes, 1 acre or more, but those are the real big contributors, so it's gonna help. It will be an impact to some businesses. But initially it'll just be the larger businesses, but yes, it will help because we'll be able to take credit for whatever amount they reduce their phosphorus by, so that will definitely help our cause.
Okay, is the city doing outreach to our larger commercial entities, or is that being?
It's still a little early. Again, it's all at the EPA level at this point. So, once it starts to come out or really get close to putting something, developing a regulation, then I'm sure, we'll have to get to the Chamber of Commerce and really get that out so everyone's educated.
Commissioner, do you know when that's, the plan is to start implementing the RDA?
I don't. I think it's still in negotiation. Again, it's something that will be very political because it will be costly to some of these larger developments that don't have any current stormwater mitigation controls in place.
Well, I remember the EPA, and I went to some, training on it or something. It was the EPA personnel there were talking about it, and that had to be 5 or 6 years ago. So they've been thinking about it for a long time.
Yes.
Been a lot- I just think that it's so important to implement that because it will really make a significant improvement and help the city tremendously.
It will.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Counselor Kayla's you're next.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. Just a few questions on the South Meadowbrook area. I know that the drainage on site at Countryside is going to be improved with the new school. Are you working with Mr. Morse to understand the potential increase in water flow in that South Meadowbrook area? And on your slides, you mentioned there are a couple areas that you already look like you worked on that I wasn't aware of, and I'm wondering if you can just detail what that work was.
Yeah, there was increase in storm drainage capacity there. Actually, we went through and put in larger pipes in Dedham Street. During these large rain events, we were actually surcharging and knocking the storm drain covers right out into the street. And this was a common event. In increasing the drainage there, again, a major project, we were able to alleviate that. We don't have that issue anymore. We're working closely with Josh Morse and his team on doing our stream maintenance while the school project goes on, because again, access is an issue. And once the school construction starts, that won't be an issue anymore. We can go in there with the equipment we need and really clean that out. And then we're looking at some great stormwater improvements, which will mitigate and reduce phosphorus through the project itself there.
But the capacity of water flowing down South Meadowbrook behind Heatherland, that's going to be okay? Because it's going to increase, right?
Again, the mitigation will help infiltrate the stormwater into the ground instead of flowing directly. So again, this is one of those items where, it's a little bit that's going to help, and it will also allow us to go in there. It's overdue for some stream maintenance back there too, but we knew the school project was coming and didn't want to go in there prior to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Farrell, you're next. I think you're still muted, Counselor.
Hello,
Farrell.
am I still unmuted?
That's good.
That's still okay. Is that okay now?
Yep.
I don't have any idea where to begin. I'm so overwhelmed by this presentation, which I thank you for, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner Sullivan. It's really comprehensive. But I guess I would like to start where my colleague from Ward 8 left off, and that was on South Meadowbrook. And I noticed in the presentation that it says that that project is completed. And I guess I'd like to understand what is completed about that, because there is some understanding, and maybe this is what you were just talking about. There is an understanding among many residents that the brook was going to be dredged from Dedham Street all the way over to Needham Street at some point because of the amount of silt in it. I will say that I'm very pleased to have been able to work with Mr. Carisi and Eric Hires on a specific project off of Jaconet Street, where they responded immediately to a breach in the retaining wall there. And then we saw a few yards down that there was another dam being created by fallen trees. But I guess the question specifically is, you say on this stormwater projects that the South Meadowbrook operation is completed. And I guess I'd like to understand, will there be dredging more along of South Meadowbrook to bring the depth of that channel to its original depth, which I would hope would help with all of the flooding?
Yes, Counselor, the project we're referring to was the increase in drainage pipe size that's underground in the street on Dedham Street. That portion's completed. And as we were saying, once the school project starts, we're going to go in there and, as you said, clean out and dredge that's the brook behind the school leading towards Needham Street, yes.
I have many other specific questions, but I'd rather not waste your time with them here. I would like to know, however, I'm appreciate being appointed to the Stormwater Advisory Group or whatever that is, and I'm just curious to know when we would be called to begin to meet and ask you lots of specific questions about this whole process. Do you have any sense of when that will begin?
We do. Actually, Shauna just brought that up yesterday, that we need to set a meeting. So you'll be hearing from probably Natalie, our admin, to get some times where we can have an initial meeting. Also, in the meantime, we'll send you the link for our webpage on the stormwater. There's a lot of good information there. Everything that we talked about tonight is there and more.
May I just a couple of general questions? You mentioned that cheesecake is just one watershed. How many watersheds does Newton have?
I think there's 5 or 6 Jennifers on. I wonder if Jennifer Steele knows.
Jennifer probably knows best.
Yeah,
If anybody
I was
knows,
gonna
Jennifer
say
knows.
there's 5 or 6 main ones. There's sub basins that
And
are
there's sub basins, yeah.
pieces of, Laundry Brook and Cheesecake Brook and some of the larger brooks, but
We'll get you that, and we also
look,
have a
yeah,
map, Counselor.
we have a nice map that outlines exactly where all the basins are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's right on the web page too.
Yeah, that's
So
on
when
the
we send a
website
link.
too. Yeah. It's a
Thank you,
good
and
question.
thank you, Commissioner Steele, because you've been very responsive to my conversations with you. One other broad question said, Border Street is one of the areas of concern. Is it a long list of areas of concern by that definition?
We have a list of low-lying areas that we address. That list is about 60 areas. Some of these are very small, don't get me wrong. The larger ones are Border Street, Homer Street, Quinnaby Quinn. There's a handful that, require Albemarle that during severe events sometimes require road closures, things of that nature until the water recedes. It's not a massive number, but again, we have 60 low-lying identifying areas that we look at. Ensure those catch basins are clear to leaves and things of that nature prior to an event.
Is that list available?
We could get it to you, sure.
I'd be interested to see that. To follow up again once more from Councilor Kalis, and the whole pumping water into the streets. There is a section of Upland Street at Heatherland and Dedham, which floods easily with any sort of rain. And I've been there a couple of times, and the residents have nothing to do but pump that water out into the street. It really is in their homes. It's not just settling in their backyards. There are at least 5 houses that are now working with their insurance companies to try to restore some of that property. Is there a process to allow neighborhoods to create ponds? If there is property nearby, that might be done with some engineering support, obviously. But is that a program that the city might be willing to talk with residents about, creating ponds in local areas? In this specific area I'm talking about, there is a large area behind these houses on Heatherland and Dedham in that area. That looked to me like one might be able to create a pond. Is that an issue that anyone the residents could talk with people about?
It really would need to be, usually when there's issues like that, where people have sump pumps in their basements and they're pumping out water continuously, there's a high water table. So when you have that condition, you dig a hole, you're really not gonna have capacity because the water table's right up near the surface. So it really wouldn't be beneficial. The first step would, if someone has real concerns about that, is to bring in an engineer in, and determine if there's some mitigation you could do on site, infiltration basins, and then tie into our storm drain system if it's nearby. We've allowed that through permitting. Instead of the real problem with, not only it being illicit discharge, is that during the winter months, when this water's pumped out into the streets, it creates real hazards in some areas. Pretty fortunate this year that we didn't have severe cold weather, but we deal with that every winter, in these areas with a high water table when we've had precipitation.
Commissioner, is there a person who is in charge of all of this stormwater business, or does it all go right to you? Are you the,
We have an environmental engineer, and Jennifer Steele, who's on the call, and the Conservation Commission, is a great resource. We work closely with her with anything that, most of the stormwater work that we conduct. We work closely with Jennifer also.
the city doesn't have any, I mean, right to imagine that the city does not have anyone who is sort of a stormwater resiliency officer who like heads up all the efforts by different departments and commissions about water?
Outside, we have, as I said, we have our environmental engineer, Eric Hires, who you've met. That's what
He's the
Eric
guy.
does. He's our stormwater engineer, yes.
It's very impressive, very
Thank you.
impressive. I appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm probably taking up a lot of your time right now. Thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Maliki.
Oh, thank you. Let me start with the question of, people pumping, whether it's sump pump water or whatever, out into the street. Is that legitimate or not? When is it legitimate and when is it not?
No, there shouldn't be any discharge into city property. As I said, the real concern there is during the winter months, and we deal with this, as I said, every winter, are icing conditions that creates.
Okay, so for example, Councilor Farrell just mentioned like 5 houses in a row or whatever on the same street, routinely pumping out water. Are we just turning a blind eye to that, or should something be happening?
Yes, well, we'll if that is happening, and we see it or reported, we notify the resident that they need to contain that or come up with a solution to tie into our storm drain system if they can't contain it on site.
Okay, and then recently, 2 weeks ago in my ward, we had a situation on Hatfield Road, construction site tear down, excavating for a larger footprint house, and the hole in the ground was large hole in the ground was filling up with water. So they were pumping the water out into the street, and I heard about it. Pam and I both got emails from a resident, and I emailed a laundry list of people, including DPW and ISD, and thankfully, Frank Nichols went over there on a Saturday morning and caught a worker and said, you can't do this without at least a silt sieve.
Silt sack, yeah.
Silt sack. They had been pumping silty water out for I don't know how long, a day or two. And that again is an example of complaint driven. If there hadn't been somebody reporting it, who knows how long that would have gone on. And then it ended up, they were still allowed to pump the water directly into the storm drain as long as they had the silt sack on. And I actually took some water samples, and in 2 days, no silt settled, so the water was clean. So I threw it out. Now I'm wishing I saved it to test it for phosphorus. So why are they still allowed to, I mean, that was the city allowing them to pump water directly into a storm drain from the groundwater that was filling up the construction site. So why would that have been allowed?
I'm not sure why that was allowed, Counselor.
Related to that, since we were allowing it, groundwater in a situation like that, would that typically have phosphorus in it from, leaves, fertilizer, whatever gets into the ground?
Yeah, without testing the water, we couldn't say, I mean,
Yeah, generally not, but I mean, it's gonna have a low amount, but in general, it's nothing compared to surface water that's been in contact with sources of phosphorus.
Yeah, like a parking lot or something like that.
Yeah, yep.
So basically, none of that should be happening. There shouldn't be any sump pumps, hoses, whatever. There's another place in Ward 3, and I told Shauna Sullivan about it, where there was a little bitty pipe going under the berm out directly into the gutter of the street. And I would see little spurts of water coming out of it. So it seems like a lot of it's happening, and we're not really doing a very good job of enforcing on that.
I don't know if he knows that's a question.
Okay, all right, just got off, be quiet. Another question, so all over the place, there are, with the new construction sites, there are these, trench drains at the foot of driveways, which are, I guess, going into the, water containment systems, and I think from your presentation about, NewGov, I guess the system for making sure that they're still working, is the system just that the homeowner gets I guess, hopefully independent inspection at certain intervals and then uploads that report into the NewGov system? Or is there anything the city is doing to actually go out and inspect the systems themselves to make sure that, 5, 10, 15 years after the house is built and the system is installed, that it's still working?
yes, so part of that permitting requires the operations and maintenance of the system. Depending on the system, how it was engineered, determines what needs to be done. And that's why we do track that now. We will be inspecting those on a regular basis, doing spot inspections. That's part of the permit, or NIPD's permit requirements.
But that's part of NIPD's, and like a spot inspections, what % of outstanding systems would be inspected each year?
We've just started doing this, Counselor. As we said, we have about 300 of these right now in our system.
Are the ones in the system only the newest ones? Because 300 seems like an awfully low number. We have about 100 tear downs a year, and I would think a lot of those have those driveway trench drains.
I'm not sure. We can check.
Okay, thank you.
So before I call on Counselor Danberg, I have a few short questions. For the City Hall ponds here, those large concrete cylinders with the holes in them, is that something new that you're adding to the ponds?
No, there's nothing that we're adding, Counselor. This may be for some of the bypass piping that needs to happen while we dredge the ponds.
Oh, I see. So it might be a temporary thing?
That's all temporary. Yes, we're not installing anything here.
Okay. Just a comment on the map of the pet waste barrels. I've been registering a dog for several years, and I've never gotten that map. So just to be sure that the clerk's office has that map. Just to check on that one. And the last one was the cemetery is doing a lot of work. They've totally rearranged the earth. They're creating hills and dales and all kinds of things. And as you may know, may have caused a problem with drainage into the neighbors' yards. They looked in NewGov for the plans for that work and couldn't find it. Should the cemetery's plans have been in NewGov?
If it was approved after the system was in place, yes, it may have, we can look into that.
Yeah, I think somebody asked this question recently. I think they they weren't required to have a building permit for what they did, I think is the answer.
I can
So,
also say that they were outside of wetland jurisdiction,
yeah.
so they did
Um,
required for a conservation permit.
I don't recall if engineering had any specific requirements as part of the ordinance, so we can look into that.
So that's why an ordinance, we've been talking about an ordinance about changing the level of the earth in ZAP, so that seems like that's pretty important.
Yes.
Okay, that was my questions. Counselor Danberg?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. A comment in regards to the question that Counselor Farrell had about a number of houses that are in a low spot. I remember a number of years ago, Ward 6 had an issue in the neighborhood of Clark Street. And it was determined that it was a chronic problem. It was a low spot. And the city actually did the engineering for a French drain type fix. It then made recommendations, I think gave a couple of recommendations as to companies that could install it. And it was installed then at the homeowner's expense. I think it was around $25,000 per house to have it done. Everybody, the whole neighborhood opted to have it done, and now they have solved that problem. And although 25,000 is certainly a significant amount of money, if you can solve a problem and stop your home from flooding, it's worth looking at. So I don't know whether the city still does that, but I'm sure that Eric Hires or the commissioner can help you out with that. In regards to discharge, first of all, I would have to say that the city does do a good job of enforcement. These things have to be reported to the city. Whenever I go for walks, in the summer months particularly, I'm always on the lookout for water trickling down streets, and I've seen a number of them and have traced them to the locations and have called them in, and every one of them has been stopped and has been fixed. The city has come over, spoken to the homeowners, and in most cases, it was an issue of an illegal sump pump that was then connected to a garden hose that was run to the end of the property, and people just didn't know that they couldn't do that. But if you just let the city know about it, the city will take care of it. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Oh, and one other thing on swimming pools do not need to be drained seasonally. And in fact, it's better for the pool itself if it's not. What they usually do is drain 12 or 14 inches out of water out. You can put that on your property and then put a winter cover on it, and that should do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Should we hold this item? All right, Councilor Rito's move hold. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that's great. Thank you so much for that comprehensive discussion. I think that really helps. And we've also been joined now by Jennifer Steele from Planning Department for the planners for the concert. I don't know what your title is, but you work with the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, Chief Environmental Planner is the official title.
And now we're also joined by Nicole Banks, who's the Commissioner of Parks, Rec, and Culture. Anybody else? No. Okay. So we're doing item 4724. Councilors Lucas, Laredo, Malachi, White, Getz, Downs, Mickley, and Lobovitz, requesting a discussion with the Department of Public Works, the Department of Parks, Rec, and Culture, and Conservation Commission regarding the condition of and potential improvements to the stormwater infrastructure in Edmonds Park. This discussion should also include which city departments are responsible for the park, flooding issues from the park to neighboring properties, the conditions of the park infrastructure, including the liner that was installed in the pond in the seventies, and how improvements to the park could be part of the city's phosphorus reduction plan. So who will start this one off?
I can kick off just with some of the work, Madam Chair, that we have planned. So first of all, if some of you may be aware of some flooding that's happening on Blake Street. That's the result of some clogged catch basins that are on park property, which unfortunately we can't access when it's as wet as it is right now. If the ground were frozen, we'd be able to get in there. We didn't see that happen this winter. So we'll have to wait for a dry spell, but we have to install some new drainage pipe and do some repair. There's about 6 catch basins in that area that need attention, cleaning. So we're working with PRC. They're going to clear a path for us that will allow access to that, that we can get it from higher ground. So that's in the works right now. That will alleviate that flooding issue that's happening on Blake Street. And then in the CIP for FY25, we do have plans for design and flood mitigation, reduction of phosphorus pertaining to the MS4. And that will be working with our consultants, and also will need to include Parks and Rec, and of course, the Conservation Commission in developing projects and design in the park.
Okay. I was looking at the Friends of Edmonds Park website. Thank you, Harry Sanders. And I saw, nobody seemed to have the answer for the liner. You described the liner as having been done, put in there to make it into a skating rink back in the 70s. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Commissioner Banks, I guess a question for you is, the liner, does it stay there? Does it get repaired? Do we take it out? Do we put it in? What, do you know what to do with that liner?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So we do have some history. I actually was looking at an article a few days ago about the liner. It was put in basically to hold water and create a skating rink, but it's been buried underground, undercovered for quite some time. In the historical article, it does talk about I think it was probably in the 80s at some point, that the liner was leaking. It no longer held water. And so that's why, they basically stopped using it to create that space. So it is, it's been under there for quite a while. We're assuming that much of it has disintegrated over time. And, I think it would be part of another project I don't know if it could be dug up. It's probably in quite a few pieces.
Yeah, I think Harry has a piece of it here with him tonight. Councilor
Sample
Ray.
piece.
Commissioner, I know firsthand that area. I mean, I literally skated there and played pond hockey there in the late 60s. So, it was a pond, or, a pond of probably several feet in depth. There was area to skate, and kids skated there. You swept off the snow, you could skate, it was pretty safe. The liner gets put in what, 70s? 72, okay? Have you, I had the privilege of going with Mr. Sanders and other counselors to do a very thorough walk of the park. Have you had the opportunity to do that?
No, I haven't been out to walk that area. I just, I think doing digging or taking a look in there, would require permitting and be a fairly large project, so.
I understand that, but I think I'll be very candid. I think it'd be extremely helpful if you and your staff went out there and physically inspected the space. The liner is there, it's breaking apart. It's obviously not in good shape. I think you brought a portion of that, Mr. Sanders, with you, but it's still there and it is clearly impeding both water. Okay, water's not even really able to get through it. And the plantings above it have very weak root systems because there's not that much soil and not much depth for them to go through. So it actually exacerbates the problem in two ways. We have an area there where you could actually have stormwater drainage right there, but it's blocked because of the liner. And to the extent you have other trees or other shrubbery or other vegetation immediately around it, it's not able to grow properly.
Commissioner, if I could jump in very quickly here. Jennifer and I know this property extremely well. I think it's fair to say that first, we're going to have DPW's engineering teams take a look at the areas potentially for stormwater relief when they're in there. And I think as part of that, they can certainly think about whether any, exactly where the pond liner is and whether it would, it could be involved in any of the stormwater work. There's substantial wetlands there now, and I don't know if Jennifer wants to say anything about that. Turning it back into a skating pond in this day and age when unfortunately we don't have a lot of ice that lasts very long is something that we'd have to think long and hard about doing.
I'm not
So,
suggesting that, Mr. Yo, necessarily.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were suggesting
I'm
then.
just trying to explain what the pre-existing conditions were because there was some
Yeah.
confusion of what was there, okay? But it seems to me imperative that we get out there quickly, not in 3, 4, 5 years from now, but soon. Assess exactly what is going on there and try to come up with some solutions. And I understand it's in wetlands, but I can't imagine having a liner that's 2 feet below ground is consistent with open wetlands.
Yeah, and our engineering team will take a look at that. And they've already begun, there's already been some reports already about Edmonds Brook from
When were those
the team.
reports generated, Mr. Yo?
I don't know, were they 2 years ago, Jim? 2, 3 years
I
ago?
think it was 2019.
Yeah,
It's
a couple years
fairly
ago.
recent,
Yeah.
but that would definitely be part, I mean.
Yeah, we'll look at all that.
As you stated, that would be ideal opportunity for some stormwater mitigation if possible.
Okay, so if we recalendar this for, say, 2 months from now, are we gonna have some progress to report?
I believe that study, Commissioner McGonigal, is for next year. I don't know at what point Woodard and Curran and team are going to get that started. So we'll get back on the schedule for that.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Banks and team can certainly get out there and take their own look as well.
So, Mr. Yo, I'm not looking for the full-scale solution in 2 months, but I am looking for a much better understanding by the city of what the current situation is so that we can at least assess it. And this docket item has been out there now for several months. We went out I think in the fall.
August 8th.
August 8th. We went out there, 4, 5, 6 of us went out there. We communicated afterwards about it. We put it on this docket for this term. It's March 5th, and frankly, I'm concerned that there's zero information about it. So I would expect that within the next couple months, we're gonna have a much better understanding of what the situation is. Not the full study, I understand that takes time, but at least a better understanding of existing conditions. I'll leave it at that.
Steele, did you tell, when we talked about this last week, I think it was, did you say that Ted Jardee was involved with doing some work on this as well? Or did I mishear that?
My interaction with Ted Jardee, who was obviously the director of utilities at the time, had to do with conditions of erosion that the stream bed that leads into the pond, where the stream comes off of Boston College land and goes under through a culvert under the main pathway, and then leads downstream through a channel before the channel breaks open into what was the skating pond. So what had happened there was some severe rain events had caused scouring, and that area in and around the trail crossing and the MWRA utility crossing needed to be reconstructed for stability.
It's
So we-
upstream from the pond.
Upstream from the pond,
Yeah.
but I did also mention the initial assessment by Woodard and Curran that generated the information for the SIIP. And I believe that there was an additional study done more recently that looked at the spillway features and other aspects of that stream course system. I think that's the 2019 study that Mr. McGonigal was referring to.
It just feels like with so many other issues going on in the city that this one kind of just sits there and doesn't get addressed. And it's muddy, it's messy because of the liner. And so we were just hoping that somebody will pick it
Well,
up
it's a
and.
city, I mean, it's more than that, Chair Albright. It's a city resource, it's conservation area, it's in the middle of Ward 2. It is a huge resource that I think is used pretty heavily. A lot of dog walkers there, people walk through there, it's very pleasant. And it could be enhanced. And it could alleviate stormwater issues because we haven't gotten to the culvert yet. But the folks in Westchester know that they have a huge problem with flooding,
Yeah, well, that,
which is part and parcel of this.
is that the Blake,
No.
the Blake Street work won't be affected by the Westchester people and the Blake people is two different problems?
Two different problems.
Yes, that's correct. Two different problems.
Could we ask you to come back to us with an assessment within a reasonable period of time of what you think needs to be done over there?
Yes, again, as I said, this is number 5 of our stormwater priorities, and we do have funding program for FY25. So this, as you saw, we have a lot of work to do, and this is a great area. I walked out there, our team walked out there to look at it. There's a lot of work to do out there also. And I think we do need to look at it and prioritize it, and that's what we'll be doing with this upcoming CIP project.
I understand that, again, you don't want to do work piecemeal. And you want to do it in a thoughtful manner, and we appreciate that, Commissioner. I think you're 100% right to get a thorough study so you know exactly what you're doing. But I would hope that in 6 weeks or 2 months at the latest, you and Commissioner Banks can come back here and at least give us some preliminary assessments.
I think that's what the study would do. We can go out there and look and make assumptions, and we have, but
Yeah, we're
you know,
gonna need,
next
we're gonna need,
steps-
yeah, we're
our
gonna need
next steps are to bring in a
studies.
consultant and
Yeah.
do that with us.
Yeah, it's work.
So is
And
that?
I will just say for the Parks Department, I mean, we know that a lot of the park spaces will be on the list for stormwater management. So working in collaboration with Public Works as, these lists get put together. When there's projects happening, or when areas are brought forward as a good candidate for stormwater management, I mean, we will be very involved, and have been at a couple meetings already to start looking at some of these sites that are recommended. And this is one on the site. So, I just think working in conjunction and collaboration together is going to be really key here.
I'm gonna ask that we
Could I suggest that the Woodard and Curran 2019 or 2020 study be shared with this committee? As I'm
Yeah, it was on the website at one point. It was posted. We can find that.
They did provide, specific, they did an assessment of, a relatively high level assessment and did provide recommendations for actions. And I think that's what has, informed the capital project planning that DPW has been going through. But looking at that report, I think might answer many of your sort of preliminary questions as to the conditions.
In addition to that report, they've also begun to look at the phosphorus control projects and locations in Edmonds Park that might be conducive to getting us some pound reduction. So that has begun to be underway. And I believe if you On our website is the phosphorus control plan. And if you take a look through that document, it's large. You could do a search on Edmonds and you will find the different maps of showing those different locations. So it's all out there. We're gonna have to sift through all of, and to prioritize which phosphorus control projects we're able to move forward on and how to finance it. So you'll be hearing more about that in the near future.
Sullivan, did you have something you wanted to say?
I was just gonna say, I'll make it easy. I'll send you the report from 2019 and the pages from the phosphorus control plan.
There you go.
Thank you. That's
Thank you,
great.
Sean.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Sanders, would you
I
like to?
just wanted to add, the 2019 report I've seen, and it makes no mention of the liner at that time, so.
So the liner may be a separate issue, which it doesn't seem to. The issues, the problems don't seem to have been linked together, so perhaps you could factor the liner into the project.
Well, we can ask if they think it's an issue. It may, it may not be an issue, just so everyone's aware.
Not an issue for what, Mr. Yo?
For flooding or for stormwater control, so.
Even if it's not, I just logically can't imagine it's a good idea to be having a deteriorating liner there.
Council Wright.
You're muted.
Sorry, I can wait. I have just some general questions for Mr. McGonigal when he just last spoke. And I can wait until after this.
Well, this is the last item, so.
Okay. Mr. McGonigal, you were talking about cleaning the basins and stuff. Is it complaint driven, or do you have a list that you do? And it sounds like it should be done more often.
Yes, no, so all the above. We have a list. This is complaint driven and it should be done more often, without a doubt. That's why we're working with Parks to make a new access road to these. Because this area, it was obviously neglected for too long.
Well, I'm not talking just this area, but other parts of the city,
Oh, no,
Border
the city,
Street,
we have a very robust catch basin cleaning program. It's all identified. These, and I'm not sure why, but we think it's because of the access, because again, it's, if it weren't frozen ground, we can't get it's a very large truck that cleans these catch basins and it needs stable ground and we didn't have that. So I believe that's the reason why it's neglected and we're going to address that.
Okay. And I would be interested in probably my other counselors to see the list of the 60 trouble areas that you have. The low
We're
lying.
happy to provide that. I have that down. We'll provide that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Council Farrell?
Thank you. Just another quick question. I think to Commissioner McGonigal, do you know who is spearheading the municipal vulnerability preparedness grant application? As you know, the state is got about 100 million. They're looking for more money. Senator Cream is working to increase that pot of money. But
Yes,
I
Counselor,
would-
that's the grant we spoke of earlier. I'm sorry, I probably didn't specify. It is the MVP grant that we are applying for the board.
and who's doing that, please?
We are, Public Works Engineering.
And that's through you again?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna move hold on this item.
I'll move hold.
And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. This was all stormwater all the time, so thank you very much for doing this with us.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Something I just don't know what it is.